Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to be taking a look at commercial excellence in field service, talking about some of the trends and defining best practices for where service organizations seem to be today. I'm thrilled to welcome to the podcast Dave Clement, who is the partner and head of the New York office at Simon-Kucher. We have had a bit of an exciting partnership underway for the last couple of months that is finally coming to fruition. And Dave and I are going to share some of that with you all today. So, Dave, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Yeah, super excited, Sarah. I think when we first started teeing up the idea of doing this, I think we set ourselves a goal of, hey, we'll be out in the field in May, June, July. So now up to November, but I think one better late than never. But I'm really excited about us doing this the right way. So super appreciative that I'm on the pod.
Yeah. Well, when you're embarking on a joint project, in addition to trying to do all of your normal things, sometimes you find things take a little bit longer than you initially anticipated.
Totally.
So, Dave, we always start with just a little bit of background for our guests. So, can you share anything you would like to about yourself, your role, and tell everyone, in case they're not familiar, what Simon and Kucher does?
Yeah. As you said, I'm a partner with a global consultancy. We just help companies grow. So top line oriented sales, marketing, pricing. We were founded about 40 years ago, actually at the advent of value-based pricing in pharmaceuticals. So if you think about the variable cost of the pill, it's 5 or 10 cents. The R&D is millions or billions, and then the value of that is exponential. So our founder, Herman Simon, actually went out to kind of create the concept of value-based pricing, taking into account willingness to pay, behavioral psychology, supply demand, elasticity dynamics. And yeah, that was kind of the advent of the firm. For the past 40 years, we've grown into a company of about 2,000 commercial excellence geeks around the world, 45 offices, 30 countries, probably until the past couple of years. We've been joking that we've been causing inflation for the past 35 years. It doesn't land as well anymore, but yeah, we're kind of one of the companies that you probably haven't heard of that's made a lot of progress in better commercial excellence across a whole host of industries. Myself, I've been really fortunate to be with the firm for 13 years now. I started when our New York office was 10 people and the firm was 400. We're now 120 strong in New York and 2,000 globally. So it's been super exciting to see our growth as a company and all the awesome things we've done to help companies grow and reinvest in their people, their product, their services. And I'm part of our industrial services business unit. So helping companies in field service space and other industrial services really think about better customer-centric growth strategies.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, like, from your perspective, from the Simon and Kucher perspective, what was the catalyst for this project and what made you want to look into how field service organizations specifically are approaching the commercial process?
Yeah, so if I think maybe 5 or 6 years back, just generally speaking, Simon Kucher, firm believer that the best path to growth is through being closer to your customer and customer-centric growth strategies, and especially in industrials and B2B industries, the service element has really grown in prominence over a number of years. To the point where folks were actually starting to commercialize their services, whether they're a service company or a product company.
Mhm.
And I think that started, just as a company, us helping solve really interesting problems for clients on how do they merge their product and service offering together to create an optimal commercial model, thinking about how they offer that model, package it, sell it, price it, et cetera. I think over the years, especially given the macro environment that we've been through with labor and inflation, services is pushed into a whole nother forefront because some of the challenges, transparently, cost of labor shortages, and just the criticality of field service industries, whether you're talking about environmental field service, machining field service, facilities field services. these men and women who work in this industry are so technically savvy and so critical to the world. And there's been a bunch of challenges and also opportunities to kind of really drive sustainability in the model. So
Mhm.
we've seen ourselves just kind of fall into being able to help some of these companies do better when it comes to commercial excellence. And I think just the macro environment that we're living in now, one is creating more opportunity, but also is making it a necessity in some
Mhm.
ways for the best to sustain themselves. So yeah, it's been an area of personal interest for me, just given all the investment that's happening in the space as well. And I don't know if you remember this, but I think back in COVID is when we met and we actually did a blog together about kind of like old school servitization.
Mhm.
And it's really cool just to see that trajectory over the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I'm curious what made you pick up the call to say, hey, let's consider this on your side.
Yeah. Well, it's an area where there is, to your point, there's a lot of challenge and a lot of opportunity and a lot of different drivers that are nudging progress along, right? So I think it's interesting to take a look at, and there's there's so much opportunity that can be born from field services organizations. In many ways, it's still untapped, right? There's still a lot of untapped potential. And so I think it's really interesting to do research like this and take a look at where are businesses across industries? Where are the pockets of progress that maybe some further behind can learn from? What are the universal challenges and opportunities that leaders across industries could come together and create best practices around? So I was intrigued, and here we are.
Yeah.
Why future of field service?
I mean, I think we had a nice interaction a number of years back and obviously started kind of following you just being someone that operates in the industry. I think your guys' mission to kind of be a galvanizing force in the space, I found really interesting and admired. I also just think about, and I'm honored to be on the pod, the discussions that you guys have, I think are very real and people driven, and
Mhm.
business can be very numbers oriented. I'd say broadly in business these days, but especially in services and field services, 80% of it is how you drive mindset changes and
Mhm.
shape hearts and minds. It's not as much about the numbers, the math, the strategy. And I think a lot of what we learned in the research also is how critical enablement is to succeed, especially in this industry with so many seller doers out there. The folks that are the product are also the sales, are also FP&A, are also ops.
Mhm.
And I think you really everything I've seen kind of really appreciates that all-encompassing piece and gets the complexity to all of this, right? There's no silver bullet. And for the listeners, I hope you don't expect to get the single answer on how to
Mhm.
solve your commercial excellence through this, but there are a bunch of levers. And if you're really thoughtful about how to think about leadership, think about enablement, yes, do some cutting edge things to drive better success. Something that the future field service has always kind of preached, at least in how I observed it.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And I've said that many times. No one on the podcast, no one that we feature in our content is going to have the blueprint to success that everyone can copy. But collectively, as a community, there's, so many different perspectives and lessons learned and, views on what the future holds that you can use it to really inform what you're doing in a valuable way. So let's talk about what we did. So can you just give everyone an overview about, what the research actually is, how it was conducted, who participated, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do with the research and give sort of a sneak peek on some of what we found.
Yeah, totally. So as a firm and given our kind of academic roots, I talked about Herman Simon as a PhD. We do a ton of studies in markets to one, understand kind of high level, what people feel the lay of the land is, right? What are some of the big macro challenges, micro challenges, also key priorities from a commercial excellence standpoint, given that's where we spend most of our time. So The research that we did, we spoke with about 180 executives globally. So really excited to get pretty broad coverage. I think about half of the respondents were US based. The other half primarily were from Germany, Spain, the UK, France, and rest of Europe. So really good global coverage. A number of different kind of sub-industries within field service. I already mentioned, right? Environmental, mechanical, facilities, et cetera. And a wide swath of company types too, multinationals, nationals, even kind of more the mid-market type firms, just to see how things were trending kind of across those different companies. After kind of talking about more high level macro micro trends, then we actually really went deep in some areas that we hypothesized were the needle movers in the space. Within commercial excellence, thinking about how teams structure their sales forces, or how do they even have sales forces for that matter, right? And what's kind of the selling proposition, the motion. Talking about pricing quite a bit, especially in this world with AI and moving to outcome-based, value-based pricing, predictive analytics, and what that uncovers. And I'm happy it's been about 10, 15 minutes, and it's the first time we're talking about digital here. But we did have a good deep dive on how folks are thinking about digital. What are leaders doing differently than maybe some of the laggards? What are the challenges, but also what are the real unlocks, given we're really at this, fulcrum of it becoming, fairly uniformly used in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, it was great. Probably 10, 15-minute survey of the folks that I mentioned, and we're excited to dive into the details. There's so much information, probably more than we can cover on 3 podcasts transparently. So I know we've got a couple of things rolled up for the next number of months together.
Yeah. You mentioned the respondents and the diversity of region, company size, and industry, all of those different things. It made me think, when I first started covering this space, there's always been an interest in the leaders that I'm speaking to, of networking and engaging and interacting with leaders across other industries. But I would say, from a competitive advantage perspective, certainly from a commercial excellence perspective, back then people were very focused on what are leaders within our industry doing. That was the bar,
Yep.
right? And I think, it was really some of the consumer experiences and more disruptive innovation that prompted a huge shift to where now there's so much more interest and need for businesses to be looking at what are the best practices in all of these other industries. Like, who cares what the best in HVAC is doing? I want to know what the best in this segment's doing and this segment's doing, and how can we pull that into our organization to not just be a leader in our space, but to really be on the cutting edge of what is working best overall. So I think that's it's been an exciting shift to see, and it makes a lot of sense. So, all right, we talked about how we went about this. Did the findings align with what you expected to see, or was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. I think the thing that actually surprised me the most was across all of the different segments of respondents. Of course, there's variance in how these folks go to market and run their businesses. From a challenges standpoint, from a focus area standpoint, there wasn't a whole lot of differences just from a pure like demographic standpoint.
Hmm.
US companies versus European companies are doing this differently, or multinationals versus nationals are doing this differently, or an HVAC services company versus a waste management, company really doing things differently. So that was actually a bit surprising. I thought we'd see some more variance. But if I reflect on that, the past couple of years, no one has experienced anything like that in their lifetime from a
Hmm.
macro pressure standpoint. So I think it makes a little bit of sense there. And then I think the amount of opportunity for commercial excellence in these spaces is so broad. That's not to say that companies aren't doing some really awesome things, but broadly speaking, across pricing, across sales, across go to market, I would venture to guess every company thinks that they can improve at least somewhere in this
Yeah.
space because it's not easy. That there was broad room for improvements. I think at like the high level, it didn't surprise me there just based on my clients and what I'm seeing in the space. I think a few of like the nuances that I was excited to see differences on is, and we'll talk a little bit about this. I think there are some companies that do pop as being kind of even higher performers than others. And I think it's like the mindset that drives that. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily like, do you do X or do you do Y? It's the folks that think like commercial is really part of the core growth engine. And it makes sense in this space given how operationally focused these folks were in their existence. Obviously, it's not that today that's just changed. It's been an evolution. But there are folks that are leaders based on how they approach their customers and how they approach technology and other things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say like nothing was shocking to me, maybe outside the fact that there wasn't as much variation. But I pass the question to you as well. I'm curious on your end.
Yeah. I actually, it doesn't surprise me that there wasn't a lot of variation because I think the kind of the premise of my career as a whole has been on how much commonality there is in
Yeah, sure,
challenge and opportunity. Now,
sure.
how you approach that opportunity is going to differ, depending on where you are, who you serve, et cetera. But the challenges, especially, I feel like are often very universal.
Yep.
And that's kind of what makes this space unique and special and such a community feel versus just a segment,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yep.
The other piece, I think it's very in line with the evolution of customer expectation
Mm,
because for a long, long time, operational excellence was competitive differentiation.
mm,
You could really set yourself apart by being supreme at executing.
right.
If you were on time and you had the right part and you got the job done the first time and you didn't do anything crazy while you
Mm,
were
yeah.
on site, you were
Yeah.
top notch.
Yeah. The bar's
And
raised,
all
right?
of a
Yeah.
sudden,
Yeah.
that got turned upside down. And I think what we're seeing is so many organizations trying to catch up
Yeah.
because all of a sudden you have to be more innovative, you have to be more customer centric, you have to adapt to a world of real-time information, real-time demand in a way that you can't only tackle from a perspective of operational excellence. Like you have to start looking outside of that. And I think where we see that potential is because there's still a lot of companies that are catching up to what the expectation has become.
Yeah. Do you think that's just, I mean, we talked about it a little earlier, like, the expectations in consumer products and tech and like other industries have created this world where folks are just used to in their day-to-day lives, like now you can go get a car and your groceries just with the snap of your thumb
Yeah.
on your phone and you need that even with your kind of blue collar industry services as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any argument for those experiences not shaping what we expect from every interaction we have with every business in every industry.
Yeah.
And I would go a step further and say that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's challenging for a lot of these industrial organizations to catch up to,
Yeah.
but you just can't tell people, hey, I know, Amazon can do it, Uber can do it, this company can
Right.
do it, all of these companies that you interact with in your personal life can do it, but
Yeah.
we don't have
Yeah.
to because we're in this space. That
Yeah.
doesn't add up. I mean, you just
Yeah.
have to adapt and you have to get up to speed, and so that's just
Yeah, I think one of the signals that I've seen just from my clients or from clients that don't have this is like the role of a chief growth officer or a chief customer officer, right? Just like leadership and organizational structure is changing because of these requirements. And I think that unlocks all of this, but it just shows the prominence and the importance is increasing because it's customer driven now, right? And
Yeah.
it's a requirement for success.
Yeah. And to do things differently requires more creativity, different skill sets, right? So
Mhm.
you have to, the leaders that are, and you need all of them. I'm not saying operational excellence just no longer is important. It is
Totally.
absolutely
Yeah.
important.
It's
It's
table
just not
stakes,
the
right?
only, it
Yeah.
is. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly the point. It's table stakes instead of competitive differentiation. So now
Yep.
you need people that can come in and say, this is amazing,
Yep.
keep being excellent, but
Yep.
how we differentiate is actually going to be X.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's cool. All right. So, overall, there's a lot of optimism within the findings, which is really exciting. And the majority of organizations do view field service as a competitive differentiator. When it comes to the optimism and that sense of good news, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the magnitude of optimism maybe was a little higher than I expected, transparently. Like, I mean, it's very high. I think upwards of 80 to
We need
90%
it
of
wherever we can get it,
that
though.
is
So,
fair. That is fair
yeah.
in this day and age. So I was happy to see that. I think it's because I'd like to think that people understand and appreciate the dichotomy that we just talked about. Like you
Mhm.
have to do these things, but the good news is there are tools, there's technology, there's a mindset shift that is enabling that. So it's not like people don't know where to go, right? The vision
Mhm.
is there. It's again, it's not rocket science, but it's how do you move people. I also think that companies have been forced to be really agile the past couple of years, given inflation, COVID, all of the macro challenges, labor shortages, et cetera, that have hit people with. So it's not like any bad news
Mhm.
is the end of the world because transparently, folks are now used to dealing with volatility. I think people would probably rather consistency than good or bad these days, and they might not get consistency, but I think there is just a mindset of being a dynamic business leader is the world that we live in.
Mhm.
And what better environment to be in where most of my competition, for example, is probably right where I am. There are certainly some folks that are out in front, but as we've talked about digital, for example, and there are a lot of really cool things happening in the space and use cases, but there aren't a lot of companies that are like perfect on it yet,
Mhm.
and maybe never will be, and that's okay. So I think there is that like the gap that can be closed is wide, and people see that as opportunity because it's not rocket science, but it's good leadership and leveraging tools, people, and process to get there.
Mhm. Yeah. So looking at the challenges, they span two dimensions: structural pressures that shape priorities, and then the on the ground execution hurdles that again expose where there are kind of cracks in that table stakes ability to execute. What else would you want to mention related to sort of the challenges that fall into those two buckets?
Yeah, maybe two things, and it's a duality really of like the whole situation. I think some of the biggest challenges are also the biggest opportunities.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of financial pressure with costs increasing, whether it's on technology, labor, parts, et cetera. But on the flip side, folks really haven't tapped the value-based pricing lever much,
Mhm.
right? And not to say that pricing is just a tool to offset costs or to drive, margin, but there is a lever to directly impact that. I think there are also a lot of kind of ankle biter competitors coming out in the space or new alternative competitors that might not look and feel like the service companies of yesteryear.
Mhm.
And I think with the breadth of service portfolio that most of our clients have and the folks that in the space, like there's a lot that you can deliver to your current customer base to really retain and acquire and combat with those competitors. So like the challenge is we've got a lot of opportunity to solve directly. I think the other piece, going back to the digital discussion, I think digital adoption was one of the top two or three execution challenges in
Mhm.
in the survey. but it was also the number one thing folks say they have to get right.
Hmm.
So we're at this, kind of pivot point now, post operational excellence, hopefully post the last couple of years of macro volatility, where now's the time, if not a couple of years ago, was the time to start really managing against these things. So the good news is it's not right now, knock on wood, there's not another COVID for the space that folks are dealing with. It's
Hmm.
more a little bit back to basics, if you will, like running the right plays to perform from a business standpoint, both operationally as well as commercially, but doing it in an agile manner to kind
Yeah.
of balance the duality.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the digital piece. So what what stood out to you in terms of where respondents are on the digital journey and what opportunity that presents?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I think back the last couple of years of talking about digital with industrial and industrial services companies, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was a big eye roll,
Hmm.
right? Or what the hell are we talking about? And then maybe last year is when you started seeing specific use cases being really successful. I actually had a client, really cool use case. So people have been doing ride-alongs for forever, where you've got a sales manager listening to a call or a tech call, and afterwards gives you guidance on how you spoke about the value, how you negotiated, opportunities to maybe cross sell, upsell, etc. There are a couple of companies now that essentially it's a wire that you put on yourself, and it listens to your conversation with a customer, prospective customer, and because of some of the strategy and the foundational elements that you've already done, it reviews what you said versus script,
Hmm.
and basically scores each conversation and gives you feedback. Hey, great job. You had a 90 out of 100 on this conversation here, 2 or 3 things that we do differently, and also summarizes that to a sales manager. And like that's a really, really interesting use case. And this client, their cross sell grew 2% in
Hmm.
just 2 months. Now again, 2%, it's not growing 20%, but these little things add up over time. And more, I feel like the history of this has been more use case driven. Let's find
Hmm.
specific use cases. And that's all and well, but like, you can't firefight your way to success where you find use case A, use case B, use case C. And we'll talk about that. And this industry has been a little bit ahead of the game with predictive maintenance, sensors, and other things in
Hmm.
certain industries. I think now, if I think about today, and this actually was probably one of the loudest insights from the research, is that the companies that have their house in order, from they know their customers and they have a decent customer segmentation, they have foundational tools, not advanced tools, but they have a CRM, they have some sort of data governance, they have people and process, they outperformed others from a digital standpoint significantly.
Hmm.
20 points on certain elements in terms of profit growth, revenue growth, et cetera. And I think what that tells me is you can't use digital to define your strategy, and it's not the be all end all. But if you do have the foundational infrastructure in progress, operationally, commercially, leadership, kind of governance, digital is really an amplifier that folks have to solve for. Separate study I did with a group of private equity operating partners. We basically asked, what are the key value creation levers across all industrial businesses? And things popped up that you would think: pricing, ops, Salesforce effectiveness. Digital was in the top five or so. At the bottom, infrastructure and systems.
Hmm.
Today, we asked that same question: what about in the next 12 months? Nothing changed except systems and infrastructure moved to the number two priority for private equity folks and their companies.
Hmm.
Because again, I think they realize that, all right, we can have some wins, and those are important to drive motivation with a use case here, a use case there. But like, to really solve this, like, we have to have our house in order. And I think this research showed that as well.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts. I'm trying to think where to start. Okay. The digital conversation is just it's very layered
Yep.
because we are at an inflection point where it is so critically important to a service organization's ability to seize this
Mm,
potential, to grow from a commercial perspective, to be able to, differentiate differently, to create new revenue streams, to evolve offerings, et cetera.
yep.
One of the challenges is that the terminology we use is so
Mm,
generic.
yes.
I don't have a,
Fair.
a solution for
I'm
this
at fault for that
today.
as well, just in this conversation.
Everyone, because we just talk about digital
Yep.
and or digital transformation.
Yep.
Okay. I think what we need to be thinking about at a minimum is drawing this distinction between a digital foundation.
Mm,
So that would be in the way I'm thinking about this, what we used to refer to as digital transformation. Do you have a strong core digital platform in place on which you run your business, where you have real-time visibility? You are doing these things that, again, have become table stakes.
mm,
However, just because they've become table stakes doesn't mean that every organization has a effective, capable digital foundation in place. And if you don't, you have to start there, right? So you have this idea of digital foundation. And then I think, for lack of better terminology, because like I said, I haven't seen it anywhere,
sure.
you have digital intelligence. And this
Yep.
is where we are today, is really moving into this era of
Yep.
not transforming from a manual business to a digital business. I mean, for God's sakes, like let's hope most companies have
Yes.
done that or
Yes.
have done iterations of that. But it's
Right.
really getting that foundational piece to a place where you're on a platform that is modern enough and capable
Mm,
enough to evolve with your business. And then you're now layering on all of these digital capabilities that
yep.
add in intelligence, i.e. AI, i.e. predictive, i.e.,
Yeah.
et cetera. So I think the one of the biggest challenges is when we're talking about this journey, we're not being specific about where the gaps are, where
Yep.
the opportunities are. And oftentimes, I think that leaves a lot of ambiguity
Yeah.
for leaders within the business to accurately define where it is that there is the most opportunity. And it's unfortunate because the needle continues to move
Yep.
for these
Faster
folks
than people can even align.
to keep
Right.
up
Yep.
with, and meanwhile they're sitting back saying like, what the hell are we even talking about, right? So there's a lot to it from that perspective. I think there are challenges in the sense of companies being very excited about this intelligence bucket
Yep.
that don't already have a strong platform or a strong foundation in place. And you risk a lot if you start building on a rocky or a, less than capable foundation from the perspective of being able to do some of the things you're talking about digitally from a commercial excellence
Mm,
perspective.
yep.
You also can't leave out the maturity of your operational
Mm,
businesses,
connected. Yep.
digital world, because if you can't make good on what you're selling, I mean, then, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all interconnected. Sorry, I went off
I
on it.
love the way you frame that. I'm definitely on team digital intelligence to try to simplify, I think, AI, ML, all of these different things that are,
Yeah.
because you're right. I mean, there is a foundation, there's a process, and there's the intelligence to do our jobs better, more efficient with more intel. And in many cases, especially in services, you're not going to, uh, you know, you're not going to automate every single process. It's not possible yet,
Hmm.
at least. And I don't want to say that I know the future here either. I would be lying if I did. But I think the intelligence nomenclature, I think that alone has a lot of layers in it in
Yeah.
itself. But separating that from the foundation is really critical.
I interviewed the CIO of Kodiak Gas
Mm,
at the Service Council in September, and they just went live on IFS not long ago. And the story is so cool because um, Pedro was very honest about the twists and turns it's taken. They've gone through exponential growth in the last couple of years. customer demands are increasing. They've identified some new revenue opportunities, but they need to be positioned to take advantage of them. They are dealing with the realities of the talent landscape. So all of these different things that we're talking about. But it's an imperfect story, but such a relatable one in the sense of where some real world situations kind of gave it some twists and turns,
Mm,
but now they're at this point where, they're now they've done the foundational piece, they're working on the intelligence piece in a way that is providing real value. But what I love about his positioning is they're looking at all of this as a force multiplier, and I
yeah,
like that context because they're not thinking about how do we reduce, how do we
yeah,
cut, how do we save, how do we minimize. They're looking at how do we amplify? How do
yeah,
we take the skill we have and do more with it? How do we remove these inefficiencies so that we can serve our customers better?
yeah,
And so the perspective is such a good one in the
yeah.
context of putting all of these pieces together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a positive growth mindset. And maybe it goes back to why there was such optimism in the space
Hmm.
because being able to tap into that force multiplication is where people's heads are at.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we got off on a little bit of a tangent because I did that. So what I want to talk about, Dave, is what we're going to do. So we've completed the research. It's ready. There is a landing page that we will point folks to that has the first bit of this. So we can point people to that. I'm going to be doing some content related to the findings of the research and sharing some of that with our audience. I know your team is also doing some content to socialize some of the different pieces of this. To your point, there's so much here. We would be really doing everyone a disservice to just give them one huge report to sift through. There's a lot of different perspectives to this and a lot of different conversations that we can have as a result. And so we are planning to do an event together at the very beginning of February in New York. So that will be an opportunity for both some sharing of best practices and lessons learned, as well as a lot of dialogue. Is there anything you want to mention about that?
Yeah, I'm super excited that we're gonna do this. So we'll have, a number of executives in our office in New York for a half day session. If you're interested in listening, please do reach out to Sarah or myself. And again, talk about I think the current lay of the land, but more importantly, dive into like real specific meaty use cases, super engaging construct. Still figuring out the final kind of touches on topic areas, but you could be sure that it'll be about kind of broad leadership, commercial excellence, digital evolution, and really where companies are succeeding and some of the misses as well, right? We want to be thoughtful and mindful of where we can all learn from our failures. So yeah, super excited that we're going to do this, Sarah.
Yeah. So we'll be marrying the findings of the research with the real world implications and the real world view of service organizations that are, living and breathing this every day. And we'll also get to have some fun together. So we will
Absolutely.
be sharing more on the event soon, an agenda, a way to register. But in the meantime, as Dave said, if you want to snag an early spot, just let one of us know. We will also continue to share, like I said, content related to the findings. We will share the landing page so you know where to go and find the report. And yeah, I'm excited for what's to come. I appreciate you, coming and giving everyone a bit of a sneak peek. I'm really pumped about the getting what we've done out into the world. I think people will find a lot of value in this look at what this looks like across industries, across geographies, and all of the conversations we'll be able to have as a result.
Totally. Well, thank you for the trust and partnership for me and my team. It's been a lot of fun just today, but also the process the last couple months. But now the fun really begins. So we're
Yes.
excited to share indeed.
Yeah. Dave, where can people connect with you in the meantime?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Simon-Kucher.com, or just emailing me, dave.clement at simon-kucher.com. Happy to share all of that in the podcast notes. But yeah, if you have anything that's top of mind as you think about year-end planning, or want to see maybe some of the other elements that we haven't publicized so far around kind of pricing activities, sales activities, cross-sell activities that might be top of mind for your 2026 budget discussions, feel free to reach out. Happy to jump on the phone and chat through the end of the year.
Perfect. So we will make sure all of that is in the podcast notes, and we will share more on the February event soon, as well as content related to our discussion today and all of the findings. So thank you again, Dave, for coming and spending some time. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. You can find more by visiting the home of the Unscripted podcast at futureoffieldservice.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter, The Insider. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.